She married 100 men, and none of them lasted the night. They said her touch could melt stone. Her scent clung to their skin for days, and when she opened her legs, something ancient wakened. Some ran, some screamed, none ever returned. But then came the last man. He didn't run. He wanted to know what was between her thighs. And what he found wasn't just pleasure, it was power. They said her waist could make a river bend. Her voice soft like velvet, but it clung to your soul like smoke. And her eyes, no man who looked into them ever walked away the same. Her name was Sina. She didn't belong to any man. Yet every man begged to belong to her. She lived alone at the far edge of the village, where the forest whispered louder than the people. Wrapped in crimson cloth and gold bangles that danced on her skin, Sina never chased, never smiled. She didn't have to. They came to her. Warriors, farmers, chiefs' sons, even a traveling priest. They lined up like fools before her door, each swearing they would be the one to tame her, to survive her, and when she picked one, the village would celebrate. Drums would echo through the hills. Bridegroom would boast. The women would whisper, but every single time, by morning he was gone. Not dead. Not buried. It's not even a footprint. Left in the dirt, just the scent of her sweat on the sheets, the faint glow of something left behind in the hut, in a silence that made grown men shiver. One man claimed he heard her moaning just before dawn, but said it didn't sound human. Another swore he saw her body glowing under the moonlight, as if something inside her was alive. But no one dared ask questions. No one went looking, because deep down they all knew, whatever she carried between her thighs, it wasn't just pleasure, it was power. That's right. And not every man was built to survive it. The first man she chose was Obika, a warrior with arms like carved ebony and a tongue as reckless as his pride. I'll have her begging by sunrise. He laughed, slapping his friends on the back, swaggering through the village like a rooster fat with luck. That night, the drums spoke his name. The fire danced high. And Sina, she stood still in the smoke, eyes low, lips curled, hips wrapped tight in red silk that clung like skin. She didn't speak, just took his hand and led him into the hut. The door closed. Fire died, and the village waited. But by morning, Obika was gone. His spear left behind, his sandals neatly placed outside the door. Inside, only the scent of sweat, ash, and something else. Sweet and burning. When his brothers banged on the walls, Sina stepped out slowly, her wrapper loose, clinging to damp skin. Her eyes were half-lidded, her breath soft. "Where is Obika?" They demanded. She only smiled, ran her fingers through her braids, and whispered, "He wasn't ready." From that day, no one ever saw Obika again. Not his body, not his shadow, not even in dreams, but the mark of his ring was added to the collection around her waist. No one knew when she started collecting them. But after Obika vanished, people noticed something strange tied to her waist. A slender chain of gold, hung with rings, not bracelets, not beads. Wedding rings, each one different. Each one heavy with a story untold. Some were carved from bone, others forged from iron, copper, or wood. One even shimmered with red stones, Obika's favorite, and with every man she married. That chain grew longer, it whispered when she walked. It clinked softly like spirits talking. And those who listened closely swore they heard the rings singing in the night. By the time she had 10, the village grew quiet. No man dared step forward again. But Sina didn't mind. She still walked through the market with slow hips and shadowed eyes, like she was carrying something the rest of the world could never touch. And maybe she was, because the truth was, the rings weren't just trophies. They were warnings, proof of every man who thought he could handle her, and failed. But what they didn't know was that she wasn't hunting husbands. She was waiting for something. Someone who wouldn't break. Someone who wouldn't run. One evening, just as the sun bled into the earth, a stranger appeared at the edge of the village, tall, barefoot, wrapped in a dark green cloak, stained with dust and time. He had no horse, no bag, no blade. Just eyes like storm clouds, watching, waiting, as if he'd seen this village in a dream. When the children asked his name, he said nothing. When the elders questioned him, he only smiled. But when he saw Sina walking by, gold rings swaying, waist glistening in the firelight, he did something no man had ever done. He bowed low, deep, silent, and Sina stopped. For the first time in years, she stared at a man longer than a heartbeat. The villagers gasped. Some whispered, "Another fool." Others just shook their heads and walked away. But Sina, she turned slowly, looked the stranger up and down. And with a half smile, she said, "Do you know what happens to men who come to me?" He raised his head and replied, "Yes, and I've come anyway." That night the drums did not play, the village did not sing, but the stars burned brighter. As Sina led the nameless man into her hut, and the door closed like the end of a chapter written in fire. The door closed with a sound like thunder muffled in silk. And for the first time, stranger stepped into the world no man had lived to tell about. Inside, the hut was dim. Candles flickered in carved gourds. Smoke rose from a bowl of burning herbs that smelled like honey and blood. But the strangest thing? No bed, just thick, woven mats, animal skins. And in the center of the room, a circle drawn in red dust. Sina stood at the edge of it, unwrapped her cloth slowly, deliberately. Every motion sacred, controlled, seductive. Her body glowed faintly. In the candlelight, not with sweat, but with something deeper. Like the moon had kissed her skin and left its light behind. The stranger didn't move, didn't blink, and when she stepped into the circle, she said, "If you take one step toward me, you can never leave the same." But the man didn't hesitate. He stepped in, barefoot, unshaken. The moment he crossed the red dust, the candles flickered violently. The herbs hissed, and something invisible brushed past his shoulder. Warm and cold at once, Sina touched his chest, and the ground trembled, not from fear, from recognition, because for the first time she felt it too. This one was different. Inside that circle, the air grew heavy, not with heat but with hunger, not just hers, something else's. Sina circled him, slow as smoke. Her fingers brushed his skin, her breath grazed his neck. But beneath her softness was a storm waiting to break. She whispered ancient words, words no man should survive. The walls trembled. The candles dimmed to blue, and on her inner thigh, just below the curve of her hip, a glowing mark appeared, serpent-shaped, alive. The stranger saw it, felt its pull in his bones. Most men would have run, but he didn't. He stepped closer. Sina narrowed her eyes. "You don't fear it?" he answered, voice steady. "I fear nothing born of a woman." She smiled, a slow, wicked, knowing smile. Then her body changed, not in shape, but in spirit. Her eyes turned gold. Her voice deepened into something that echoed, and her skin shimmered as if it were shedding light. From the shadows, a second presence rose. Not seen, only felt. It coiled around them both, breathing, watching. "Then prove it," she said. "Take me and survive." And as she pulled him into the circle's center, the door slammed shut. Not with wind, but with fate. That night, no one heard a sound. No moans, no screams. Just silence. But when the sun rose, the hut was still closed. The village waited. Because if this man lived, he would become more than her husband. He would become the key to her curse. Long before she became the woman who made men disappear. Before the rings, before the whispers, before the curse, Sina was just a girl with strange eyes and a body that carried too much silence. She was born under a blood moon. The night lightning struck the river and set it ablaze. Her mother didn't survive the birth. Her father refused to name her. The midwives said she never cried, not once. She just stared as if she knew something. World had forgotten. By the time she turned 10, animals avoided her. Flames bent in her presence. And whenever she bled, the blood shimmered with gold. The village priest called her a gift from the old gods. The herbalist whispered, "No," a warning. But it was her grandmother who saw the truth. Unseena's 13th moon cycle. She woke her in the night, took her deep into the forest, and showed her a shrine hidden beneath the earth. There, under the roots of an ancient iroko tree, she spoke the words passed down through blood and bone. "You are the vessel. What lives inside you is older than love, older than death, and one day it will demand to be fed." That night, Sina dreamed of a serpent made of fire curling between her legs, whispering in a tongue no man could understand. When she awoke, her thighs were warm, and a faint mark had appeared beneath her skin, pulsing softly like a second heartbeat. She didn't know it yet, but her body was no longer her own. It happened on a night when the moon hung low, casting silver across the river like threads of silk. Sina had wandered into the forest's edge to be alone, where the world felt quiet and the air thick with whispers. But someone else was there. Bako, the blacksmith's son, bold, curious, and known for chasing things he didn't understand. He stepped out from behind the trees, his eyes on her, drawn to something he couldn't name. She turned to face him, calm and still. "You shouldn't be here," she said. He smiled, brushing off the warning. "I just wanted to talk," but he stepped closer. It's too close. And when his hand reached toward her, the space between them pulsed, like the earth itself was holding its breath, just as his fingers grazed her side. A warmth surged beneath her skin. It began at her waist, where the faint glowing mark lay hidden. It spread through her like a wave of memory and energy. Bako froze. His breath caught, his body locked as though he had stepped into a dream too powerful to escape. His eyes filled with something between wonder and fear. And then he fell, not hurt, not broken, but changed. His gaze unfocused, his mouth murmuring. A name, hers, over and over, as if trying to recall something sacred that had just slipped away. Sina stood in the silence, her skin still warm, her heart racing. When she looked down, the mark at her hip glowed faintly, pulsing like a second heartbeat, and in the stillness of her mind, she heard a voice, soft, low, almost like a memory. "You've only just begun." That night, beneath the moon, Sina understood. There was something inside her, something ancient, protective, powerful, and it had awakened. News of what happened to Bako spread like dry leaves in Harmattan wind. No one spoke openly, but they whispered how the strong boy who once bent iron with bare hands now sat quietly in corners, eyes distant, murmuring Sina's name like a man who had seen the spirit world. Some said she cursed him. Others claimed he had touched something forbidden. But no one asked Sina, and she began to listen, not just to people, but to the thing inside her. It whispered at night, the rustle of her bedsheets, in the rhythm of her breath when she closed her eyes. It didn't speak with words, but with urges, sensations, flickers of memory that weren't her own. She started experimenting, not with men, but with rituals. She would sit by the fire, draw the ancient symbol from her hip into the dirt and dance barefoot around it until sweat kissed her skin and the air itself shimmered. Sometimes the flames would turn blue. Other times she'd feel the earth pulse beneath her, like a drumbeat only she could hear. Her body became a temple, her movements a language, and the mark a key. She realized it didn't just protect her, it responded to emotion, rhythm, and trust. It tested anyone who came close, and only the brave or foolish could handle its truth. By now, boys, who once boasted of taking her in marriage, avoided her shadow. Even grown men turned their faces when she passed, unsure whether to fear her or worship her. But not all ran. One night a traveler came, not from the village, not bound by its fear. He carried a drum on his back and fire in his eyes, and unlike the others, he looked at her like he already knew her name, even though she'd never spoken it. That night, for the first time, she invited a man into her hut, and the mark beneath her skin stirred, not with warning, with welcome. His name was Kamau. He didn't flinch when she opened the door to her hut, didn't hesitate when her eyes met his, steady, probing, unreadable. Where others saw danger, he saw depth. He stepped inside like he belonged there. Like the scent of her skin and the silence between them were already familiar. Sina said nothing. She didn't need to. Her gaze was the invitation, and his calm was the answer. She moved gracefully. Sitting by the small fire at the center of the hut, Kamau sat across from her, laying his drum beside him. "You've been waiting for me," he said, not as a question. Sina raised an eyebrow. "You sound sure?" He leaned forward slightly, letting the firelight carve shadows across his face. "Because I've seen you before, in a dream I wasn't supposed to remember." Her breath caught. That voice inside her stirred again, but not with warning this time. It was curious. Intrigued. Kama removed the cloth from around his wrist. On his skin was a faint mark, not like hers, but similar, a symbol she had only seen once in a vision that made her wake sweating. She didn't touch him, but the fire between them rose just a little higher, as if it too recognized something sacred. The mark on her hip began to warm again, but there was no fear this time. No resistance. Kamal met her eyes and said quietly, "I don't want to take anything from you. I came to remind you who you are." Sina stared at him, not as a girl, not even as a woman, but as something becoming, and in that moment she knew this was no ordinary man. He hadn't stumbled into her life. He was sent, not to break her, not to claim her, but to unlock the part of her that had always been waiting. For the first time, the mark didn't flare in warning. It pulsed in welcome. That night, something ancient passed between them, not through touch, but through presence. They sat in silence, the fire crackling gently, casting dancing patterns on the mud walls around them. The shadows seemed to move. With intention, like old spirits watching, waiting, Kamal closed his eyes and began to tap his drum softly. A heartbeat rhythm, slow and deliberate. Each beat echoed in Sina's chest. As the sound filled the room, the mark on her body warmed again, like it was listening. Sina's breath slowed. Her fingers traced the same symbol in the dirt beside her. And in that moment she saw visions, fleeting but vivid. A tall tree wrapped in golden vines. A woman, standing barefoot in a field of ash, smiling. "Wow, serpent." And then a lion, both circling a glowing pool of water. She opened her eyes and Kamau was watching her, not with hunger, not with fear, but with a kind of knowing that made her tremble. "You've carried it alone for too long," he said gently. "That kind of power, it needs to be shared, or it begins to consume." She didn't know whether to pull away or fall into him, but her body chose. Not in a way of desire, but in recognition. She stood, stepped toward him, and sat beside the drum. She laid her hand on it over his. When their skin touched, the drum stopped. Silence, but not emptiness. A heavy, charged stillness filled the room. The mark on both of them glowed faintly now, mirroring one another like twin flames. Their connection wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was deep, slow, and rooted like a tree that had been growing underground for centuries, now finally reaching the surface. And without speaking, they both understood. They were not just drawn together by fate. They were part of a secret too old for words. The fire had died to embers, but the warmth between them remained. Kamau lay beside her, not touching, but close enough that their breaths matched. Sina stared at the roof of her hut, eyes wide open, feeling something alive just beneath her skin. Her mark didn't just glow anymore. It pulsed, rhythmic, steady, like it was sinking to something deeper than a heartbeat. Outside, the wind began to stir. Not the gentle rustle of night leaves, but a low, circling breeze that made the flames in nearby huts flicker wildly. Somewhere in the distance, a goat bleated and fell silent. Children woke from sleep crying without knowing why. The elders stepped out of their homes, looking toward Sina's hut with narrowed eyes and ancient fear in their throats. Inside, Sina sat up, the mark glowing so brightly now that it cast patterns on the wall. Kamau didn't move. His eyes were closed, lips parted, as if caught in a trance. Sina reached for his wrist, touched the symbol inked into his skin, and in that instant she heard a voice. Not outside. Not inside, but beneath everything. You were never meant to carry it alone. The union has begun. Now the test will come. The ground beneath them rumbled, so subtly that only she seemed to feel it. Kama gasped once, and then stilled. The mark on her body dimmed. But the feeling of power did not fade. She stood slowly, pulled a shawl around her shoulders, and stepped out into the village night. Dozens of eyes stared at her from the shadows, some wide with fear. Others narrowed in judgment, but none dared speak, because they all felt it, that something had changed. Something that couldn't be undone in Sina. She walked like a woman who no longer needed to explain herself, because deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. By morning, the whispers had become winds. And in the village of Engele, winds carried weight. The elders gathered beneath the baobab tree, eyes cloudy with age, but sharp with suspicion. She has awakened. It, murmured one. No girl her age should survive the union, another hissed. They spoke of old laws, buried secrets, of a lineage that was meant to stay forgotten. Meanwhile, Sina walked through the village square, her bare feet silent against the dust, her face unbothered, but her soul alert. Children no longer ran to her. Mothers pulled them close. Men lowered, their gazes some out of fear, others out of shame. For once they'd tried to own her, but now they couldn't even understand her. The same girls who used to envy her beauty now whispered about witchcraft. She dances with spirits. She sleeps with demons. Did you see the fire around her hut last night? But above it? All, the one truth none dared speak aloud. Sina had survived what no man ever did. That, and more than that, she had chosen it. She hadn't run. She had walked out stronger, and that terrified them more than any curse. Even Kamau. He remained inside her hut, resting, his skin still warm with energy. His dreams thick with symbols neither of them fully understood. But Sina could feel it now. The mark was no longer just protection. It was a signal, a call, and someone had heard it as she walked past the edge of the village. Toward the forest path, a strange scent brushed her face, sweet, metallic, like the air just before. A storm, the wind shifted, and from the trees, a pair of glowing eyes watched her, silent, still, patient it had begun. The forest greeted her like an old lover, dark, humid, humming with secrets. Birds didn't chirp here. The wind didn't rustle. The leaves, it breathed low and hot around her ankles. Whispering a name she didn't yet know, she carried Sina stepped carefully, her fingers brushing bark that pulsed warm under her touch. The trees weren't just alive, they remembered her. Ahead, in a clearing drowned in golden light, stood a shrine cracked, moss-covered, almost swallowed by time. Yet the symbols carved into its stone glowed faintly. Or matching the mark on her thigh, she kneeled, not out of worship, but instinct. As her fingertips grazed the base of the shrine, sudden vision pierced her mind. A woman draped in crimson silk, a crown of ash and gold upon her head. Behind her, a line of faceless men, naked, trembling, vanishing one by one. Beneath her feet, fire, desire, judgment. Sina gasped, snatched her hand back, but the mark on her body flared again. And this time, she heard the voice more clearly. We're the seed of the first wife, the one whose desire no man could contain, whose power was buried, feared sealed in flesh. Sina staggered back. The first wife. Her grandmother had spoken of her in whispers. A woman so dangerous they said she could undo a man's will with a kiss, and strip his soul bare with a glance. The elders said she was cursed, but the shrine told a different story. She wasn't cursed, she was chosen. And Sina, she wasn't possessed. She was reborn. Suddenly the ground trembled, not violently, but deliberately. A warning. From behind the trees, a shadow peeled forward. Tall, masculine, cloaked in animal skin and smoke. Its eyes weren't eyes at all, just pits of burning blue fire. It stared at Sina like it recognized her. You carry. Her fire, it said, voice deep and wet like distant thunder. And fire must be tested. Anna didn't run, didn't speak. She stood slowly, Mark glowing through the thin fabric at her hip, and whispered, "Then test me." The shadow stepped closer, not with rage, not with hunger, but with the heavy grace of something that had lived too long to fear. Death. Its form shimmered between man and beast, one moment cloaked in fur and muscle. The next, smoke and fire curling from its spine like incense from an altar. Sina stood her ground, though the heat rolling off him made her skin shimmer with sweat. She could feel her Mark responding, as if the fire inside her was rising to meet his. "You were not meant to awaken this early," the figure said, voice echoing around her. "Yet here you are, wearing her skin, breathing her hunger." He reached out not to strike her, but to test her. His fingers hovered over her collarbone. And though he never touched, Sina felt it, a surge. Like 1,000 hands brushing along her spirit. Her knees weakened, but she didn't collapse. "What are you?" she whispered. "I am what comes when you open the gate," he replied. "I am what loved her, and what she destroyed." Suddenly, the wind whipped in a circle around them, lifting her braids, pulling at her dress. Skin lit like coal, kissed by flame, not burning, becoming. "You want to test me?" she hissed, stepping closer, chest to chest. "Then stop talking and try." The shadow paused, then smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, knowingly. With a gesture, the earth beneath him glowed with a perfect ring of fire. The trees bent back, forming a circle of breathless silence. This was no fight. This was no seduction. This was a claiming, not of body, not of pride, but of power. He lunged, but not with fists. With force, a rush of memories, sensations, ancient names burst into her mind. Images of women with burning eyes, of men falling to their knees in awe, of kingdoms brought to ruin by one whisper, one kiss. Sina screamed, not in fear, in release her. Back arched, her toes dug into the dirt, and her Mark blazed like a second sun. The shadow froze, and then he knelt. "You are ready," he said, his voice now calm. "You carry her flame, but you are not her." He looked up, eyes no longer burning, but wet human. "You may be more." Then he vanished, leaving behind only heat and ashdot, and in the center of the firing, Sina stood alone. Changed, Sina returned to the village before sunset, her feet dusty, her body humming with energy that made the air around her shiver. Children peered from behind baskets. Women clutched their necklaces tighter. Even the goats stopped bleeding when she passed. The mark on her skin no longer glowed constantly. It pulsed, like a drumbeat heard only by those who knew what to fear, or what to follow in the center. Of the village, Komau stood waiting, his eyes no longer soft with longing, now sharp with understanding. He saw her, truly, and bowed his head not in submission, but in recognition. "You walked the path," he said softly, "and you didn't burn." "I became the flame," Sina replied. Behind her, a hush spread as the villagers slowly gathered, not by force but drawn. It's like insects circling, something they could not name. The eldest of the tribe, Mama Deka, emerged from her hut, a woman whose voice once silenced men, whose judgment was law. She walked straight to Sina, eyes hard, mouth trembling. "Child, do you know what you've done?" "I've survived what was meant to consume me," Sina said. Deka's face twitched. "You wear the legacy of the first wife, and with it comes power, yes, but also hunger. And men will try to own you. Others will try to kill you." Sina stepped closer, so close that the elder could feel the warmth rising from her skin. "Let them try," she whispered. Gasps. Gasped. One man spat into the dirt. Another dropped to his knees and muttered prayers. Two women crossed their arms and nodded. Finally, someone was challenging the silence. Kamau stepped beside her now, not as protector, not as husband, but as witness. "She is not cursed," he said. "She is called." And just like that, the village split. Some turned away, whispering curses. Others watched with eyes burning like embers. But one thing was clear. Sina no longer belonged to the rules of men. She had become a symbol of desire, of danger, of possibility, and symbols. They don't just survive, they spread. Night fell heavy on the village, yet the air refused to cool. Even the moon watched from behind clouds, as if unsure whether to bear witness. Sina sat alone. Outside her hut, the mark on her thigh pulsing in rhythm was something ancient, something waking, something coming. Then a whisper of footsteps, not fearful, not clumsy, deliberate, confident, familiar. She turned on there, at the edge. Of the firelight stood a woman draped in midnight blue, skin kissed by gold dust, eyes lined in kohl that shimmered like serpent scales. But it wasn't her beauty that made Sina freeze. It was her face, her nose, her chin, her eyes. They were Sina's. "Who are you?" she asked, voice low. The woman smiled, slow and knowing. "Your sister," she said. "Now born of another woman, but marked by the same fire." Sina stood, the fire crackling between them now like a living barrier. "Lies," she whispered. "I have no sister." The woman stepped forward, and with a slow pull of her robe, she revealed her left thigh. They're the same glowing mark, only older, deeper, etched like it had been, carved by flame and pain. "You think you're the only one?" the stranger said. "You're not the first, and if we're not careful, you won't be the last." She threw something into the fire, a dried, blackened heart. It sizzled, releasing smoke that smelled of honey and rot. Sina flinched. "What is this?" she demanded. "A warning," the woman said. "The men you frightened, they've called others. Priests, soldiers, hunters of the marked." She leaned in now, close enough that Sina could see the fine cracks along her lips, as if they had kissed too many secrets. "You think your power will protect you? It won't, but ours together might." Sina's pulse quickened, not with fear, but recognition, and something deeper, something primal, a bond she didn't know she was missing. "What's your name?" she asked. "Naya," the woman said, stepping fully into the light. "Daughter of flame, keeper of the second secret." Sina's mark burned in answer. Her mouth opened, but no words came, because deep in her gut, she felt it. This was only the beginning. The fire between them dimmed. Not from lack of wood, but because even flame seemed to lean in. Listening Night lowered herself beside Sina, her voice soft, but sharpened with something ancient like a dagger wrapped in silk. "They told you your mark was a gift," she began, "or a curse, depending on who was whispering." Sina nodded slowly. Her heart thudded in her chest like it, too, was waiting for truth, but that was only half of it. Naya pulled a vial from her robes. Inside, a black liquid shimmered with gold threads, thick, alive. "This," she said, "is the second secret. What our mothers never told us." She uncorked it. The scent hit Sina like thunder. Musk, blood, honey, and desire. Her eyes fluttered, memories she never lived flashing behind her eyelids. A woman crowned in fire, surrounded by kneeling kings. Another dancing atop a battlefield, warriors crying. "Her name, what is it?" Sina whispered. Night smiled slowly. "It's memory. All the women who bore the mark before us, everything they touched, broke, built, loved, left behind." She dipped her finger into the vial and traced it onto Sina's sternum. The mark on her thigh blazed in response, and in that moment, Sina felt everything. A queen who bled her enemies, dry with a kiss. A healer who drove madness from men with only her breath. A mother who birthed twins under eclipse and swallowed lightning to keep them safe. They lived inside her now, her back arched, her hands clenched the earth. And when she opened her mouth, she didn't scream. She spoke in a language she didn't know, but her blood did. The flames turned blue, the wind howled. And somewhere, far from the village, something woke. Naya pulled her back gently. "Now you see," she whispered. "They don't fear you because of what's between your legs. They fear you because of what's buried in your bones." Sina opened her eyes, glowing now, golden and endless. "Then let them come," she said, and for the first time since her birth, she felt no fear, only fire. Morning broke slowly. The sky bled with streaks of burnt orange and violet, as if the heavens themselves had seen what happened last night and were still processing it. But the village was not silent. They had heard the wind scream, seen the fire turn blue, felt the ground quiver as if something massive had shifted beneath their huts. Rumors ran like water, she speaks. Dead languages, her skin shines like metal. She isn't one woman, she's many in one. Children peeked from behind banana leaves. Old women spat salt over their shoulders. Tanned men. They no longer approached her hut, not even to steal a glance. Sina sat beneath the baobab, her body still tingling with the memories Naya had poured into her. She could taste ancient blood in her mouth, feel the ache of battles she hadn't fought. And yet she felt more alive than ever. Naya paced nearby, her robe dusted with the ash of sacred herbs. "You started something you can't stop," she said. "I didn't start it," Sina replied, voice low. "I just stopped hiding it." Suddenly, Kamau appeared from the shadows. His shirt was torn, eyes bloodshot, and he smelled of smoke and fear. "You need to leave," he hissed. "Now tonight, why?" Naya asked, stepping forward. "Because the council met in secret," he said. "They've summoned the fire reader." Silence. Even. The trees seemed to hold their breath. Sina stood slowly. "That's just a myth," she said. "It's a tale to scare girls from playing with shadows." Kamau shook his head. "He's real. And he devours more than flame." He looked at her, then not. With lust or longing, but with something heavier. Eats power, Sina, and they're bringing him. For you. The name hung in the air like smoke. The Fire Dash Eater. Not just a myth. Not just an old fear whispered to frighten children. But a man, if you could still call him that. One who had once walked with kings and queens, until he began consuming. Them? They've summoned him? Naya asked, her voice cummed, her fists clenched. Kamau nodded. He was seen at the riverbank. In red robes, eyes like charcoal. No footprints in the sand. Sina's breath caught in her chest. Not from fear, but something deeper. Recognition. As if her blood remembered a danger. Her mind had never met. Naya stepped beside her. "We were told stories, sister," she whispered. "Of a man who devoured women like us, not with hunger, but with envy. He believes power doesn't belong in our flesh." Kamau looked between them. "He'll come at night, not with fire, but with silence. When he steps into your home, the candles will go out. Even your heartbeat will falter." Sina turned. Slowly, her eyes glowing faintly now, a slow ember building beneath her skin. "Then let him come." Kamau's voice cracked. "Seen, this isn't bravery. This is death." She stepped forward, brushing her fingers across Kamana's chest. A soft touch, like the wind before a storm. "You ran before, like the rest. But this time, stay. See what happens when a woman stops running too." The mark on her thigh pulsed, sending a ripple up her body. Her spine arched, her breath deepened. She wasn't just a vessel anymore. She was becoming a weapon. Naya lit a small dish of blue oil, setting it at Sina's feet. "Then tonight," she said, "we feed the fire before he tries to eat it." And in the sky above, a single black raven circled once, then disappeared behind a blood-colored cloud. That night, stars refused to blink. The moon hid behind. A gauze of mist, as if the sky itself did not wish to witness what was coming. Inside her hut, Sina stood barefoot, surrounded by herbs, mirrors, and bowls filled with glowing oils. "If he comes to unmake you," Naya said, "then you must. Be fully made before he arrives. It's not with weapons," she added, "but with remembrance." Sina slowly undressed, not from shame, but with purpose. Her body no longer felt like something borrowed. It was a temple, a forge, story that had not yet finished speaking. Naya approached with a carved wooden brush dipped in crimson clay. "We mark where you've bled." She painted a symbol over Sina's thigh. "Where you've been touched." She traced her belly with spirals of gold dust. "Where your fire lives." A final touch, between her breasts glowing softly. As if her skin knew the ritual's rhythm, each mark awakened something. Her breath grew heavier. Not from lust, but from awakening. Her body remembered every lover who couldn't handle her truth, every elder who whispered warnings about women who burned too hot. Every night she cried without understanding why. The air bent around her when she wept. She saw it now. She was born not just to seduce, but to summon. Ow. When he comes, Naya whispered, pressing her forehead to Sina's, he will try to see only your body.
Ow!
Make him see your spirit. Outside, drums began to beat low, slow like a warning or a heartbeat. Sina stepped too. The doorway, cloaked in nothing but moonlight and meaning. Her marks glowed. Her shadow stretched unnaturally long behind her. Let the fire eater come, she murmured, and as the wind rose, the flames in her bowls turned blue again. There was no warning, no footsteps, no wind, not even silence. Just absence, like the world had exhaled. Forgot to breathe back in. Then dash knock, not on the door, but on her bones. As if the fire eater wasn't standing outside her hut, but already inside her. Sina turned, her breath slow. Ritual oils still shimmered across her body like armor made of memory. The flame in her oil dish bent backward, away from the door, and then he entered. Tall, wrapped in a robe, the color of dried blood and shadow. No feet beneath the hem. No eyes, only twin pits of ember in his skull-like face. The fire eater, but his mouth. His mouth smiled. You're different, he rasped. The others burned quickly. You, he inhaled through his teeth. You carry old flame. Sina didn't flinch, didn't cower. She stepped closer, bare feet kissing the earth. Her chin high. You've come for my fire? She asked, voice a low hum. Then come take it. The fire eater tilted his head, amused. They always said the mouth is bold until the flame licks it. He reached forward, but stopped. His fingers hovered above her chest, where Naya had drawn the glowing spiral. The mark pulsed. Not in fear, an invitation. Touch it, Sina whispered. And see what burns first, me or you. The air trembled. The fire eater faltered. For a heartbeat, the endless hunger in his gaze flickered. What? Are you? He growled. Sina stepped into him, so close the marks on her skin lit his bones. I am every woman you thought you consumed, every ember you thought died. Am the flame that remembers. And then she kissed him, not with love, not with lust, but with centuries of fury and pleasure and stolen power. His robe caught fire, not red. Not yellow, but gold. He staggered. The fire eater, the devourer of women, the silencer of power staggered. Sina's kiss had not been of flesh. It had been memory, fury, and legacy woven into heat. His robe ignited fully now, but he did not scream. He trembled. What did you do to me? He hissed. Sina stepped back, her breath steady, the glow on her skin now pulsing in rhythm with the flame around him. You tasted what you've spent centuries avoiding. A woman who knows what she's worth. The fire eater's hands flew to his chest. He clawed at the burning spiral mark she wore, but it was now reflected on his body, seared into him like a brand. Naya appeared behind Sina, chanting softly in a forgotten tongue, each word pulling light from the hut's corners, bending the air. It's not a curse, she told him. It's a mirror. You see now what you've stolen. You feel now what you feared. The fire eater dropped to one knee. Outside, the villagers gathered, drawn by the impossible light pouring from Sina's doorway. The elders, the women, the men who had once run from her bed in terror. They saw the shape of the monster inside. Not Sina. Him, the fire eater, looked up at her, a trace of something like desperation in his glowing sockets. And me. Sina crouched to his level, her voice velvet and steel. You fed on fear, but I don't feed you anymore. She turned her back to him and walked through the fire. It parted for her, welcomed her, and when she stepped outside, the crowd gasped, not because she was naked, but because she was whole, lit from within. Crowned by ash and light, a little girl stepped forward from the crowd and whispered, Is she the goddess? Someone else answered, No, She's the fire the goddess left behind." The hut behind her still crackled, but the fire no longer consumed. It worshipped inside. The fire reader lay motionless, not dead, but undone. His shape now a hollow vessel, smoking quietly on the ground. Sina stood tall, body marked and glowing. Sigils, skin kissed by ash. The villagers stared, not with horror, but with something else. Awe. The silence stretched until one of the men she had once married, the second to run, stepped forward. His voice broke. "You could have destroyed us. All of us. Why didn't you?" Sina tilted her head. "Because fear never served me. Neither did revenge." Her gaze swept the crowd, at the women hiding behind doors, at the boys clutching fathers who never taught them how to kneel to power, only to crush it. She raised her hand, the golden glow pulsing from her palm. "This isn't punishment. It's a reminder of who I am, of who you tried to silence, of what happens when truth is buried between thighs and called danger." Naya stepped beside her, shoulders square, voice calm. "You feared her flame, but it's what kept you warm." Then a young woman, no older than 16, stepped out from the crowd. She walked up to Sina, kneeled. "Teach me," she whispered, and like dry leaves catching fire, others followed. One by one, not all, but enough. Women, men, even those who once laughed behind her back, now bowing before the woman who faced a monster and stayed standing. Sina didn't smile. She radiated. "This village will change," she said. "Not because I demand it, but because your daughters now know what fire really feels like." The flames behind her flared once, then vanished, not as destruction, but as rebirth. The fire had gone out, but its heat still lingered in the soil, in the sky, in the people's eyes. Sina had returned to her quiet hut, but something about the air had changed. Men no longer looked at her with mockery nor fear, but with uncertainty, like she was. Both the cure and the curse they didn't know how to name. And yet, through the whispers and stares, through the silent nods and cautious glances, one man came forward. He wore no beads, no feathers, no cloak of ego like the others. His name was Tamba, the 100th husband. It's the one who never ran. He had stayed, not because he was fearless, because he had seen something in Sina that terrified him, and still, he wanted to know it. He waited outside her door that evening, holding nothing but a calabash of water and a carved wooden flute. "You never asked why I stayed," he said softly. Sina didn't open the door, but her voice came through it warm, measured, watching. "Because you knew what was between my legs wasn't the danger." Pause. "It was what was behind my eyes." Tamba smiled faintly, lowering himself to the ground. "I stayed because I've always wanted to learn from the fire, not extinguish it." Inside, Sina sat still. The candlelight flickered across her marks. The flame pulsed like a heartbeat for the first time. She didn't feel hunted. She felt seen. But that didn't mean she trusted him. Not yet. "Then tell me," she said through the wood. "Why now? Why speak when the village finally kneels?" Tamba looked up at the moon, its light soft and knowing. "Because you've shown them your flame. Now I want to show you my shadow." The night curled thick around them. Crickets stilled. The moon blinked behind a drifting cloud. Sina opened the door. Not wide, just enough. Enough to see his eyes. Tamba didn't rise. He didn't push forward. He simply reached into his satchel, pulled out something wrapped in aged cloth. He placed it gently between them, then unwrapped it. Inside was a mask, but not ordinary. Black obsidian, carved with feminine curves. Smooth as water and sharp as thunder. And in the center between the brows was a spiral, the same spiral that now pulsed on Sina's skin. Her breath caught. Not in fear, in memory. "Where did you get this?" she asked, stepping into the moonlight. Tamba didn't answer immediately. He touched the edge of the mask like it could. "Still whisper my mother wore it, but only once. It's the day she disappeared." Sina's eyes narrowed. Your mother was the one they said went mad. The one who vanished into the forest after claiming she'd spoken to the red flame. Tamba nodded slowly. "The village said she lost her mind, that something between her legs had cursed her, that she touched the wrong spirit." He looked up at Sina, voice thick. But I remember the night she left. She wasn't mad. She was powerful. Too powerful. Like you, Sina knelt, her eyes never leaving his. Then why did you come here? Why marry me, knowing what the village whispers? Tamba looked at her the way only a man who'd lived with mystery his whole life could. Because I've seen what fear does to women like my mother. Like you, and I wanted to see what respect might do instead. Sina's heart didn't flutter. It roared quietly, because this was not seduction. It was recognition. But she still wasn't sure if Tamba came with truth, or with a curse dressed in tenderness. If you wear that mask, she said, you don't get to lie. Tamba picked it up, held it to his face, and the mask fit perfectly, and his shadow stretched longer than it ever had before. The mask didn't. Just fit. It breathed as soon as it touched Tamba's face. A pulse rippled through the air, subtle but ancient, like a drumbeat beneath the ground. Sina stepped back, not in fear, in recognition. Her thighs warmed. Not from desire, but from the mark, glowing once more, responding to something older than her name. That mask. It's not just your mother's, she whispered. It's mine. Tamba lowered it, puzzled. How? Sina closed her eyes. And suddenly, she was elsewhere. Not in the village. Not in this body, but in a circle of women. Fire dancing between them, each one marked like her. Right. Their thighs lit with spirals. Their eyes fierce with knowing. In the vision, one woman taller, crowned in ash, held the obsidian mask. This mask chooses, she said. It remembers only those who survived fire and still offered warmth. Sina gasped, eyes flying open. Tamba stood still, the mask now resting in his lap. Your mother. She was one of us, she said softly. And I was her echo. Tamba blinked. Then maybe I'm not just your husband, he said carefully. Maybe I'm your messenger. Sina's voice dropped. Or my undoing. Because the mask remembered her. But it also remembered the first betrayal. The woman who broke the circle. Who fed their secrets to a man. Caused the fire to die for generations. And that woman looked like her. Sina's pulse raced. A memory. Or a warning. Could Tamba be the key to restoring the power of the marked women? Or had the mask brought him here? To test her? The obsidian mask sat between them like a coiled question. Sina stared at it, and it stared back. It shimmered subtly, as if carved from solid midnight. No straps, no fastenings, just desire. Put it on, Tamba whispered. Sina hesitated. Not because she feared what she'd see, but because she feared how deeply she'd feel it. With slow, deliberate grace, she lifted the mask and brought it to her face. The moment it touched her skin, everything changed. The hut dissolved. The night melted. She stood naked in a circle of fire, surrounded by whispering shadows. But they weren't strangers. They were herselves. Versions of her across time, each with a different lover, a different story, a different price. One with silver braids and a spear, another with a swollen belly and lightning eyes, another bound in chains, yet laughing. Each one whispered the same word. Remember. Sina's knees buckled, not from fear, from sensation. The flame inside her mark surged, not burning, but blooming. It licked across her belly, curled up her spine, coiling around her neck like an invisible serpent, and at the center of it a man's face. Not Tamba's, the fire reader. You think you defeated me, his voice echoed, cruel and honeyed. But I never lived in one man. I live in every man who cannot stomach your power. Sina ripped the mask off, gasping. It's back in the hut, sweating, glowing. Tamba's eyes. Wide he had felt the air shift. What did you see? He asked. She looked at him not with fear, but with clarity. Not all fire dies in battle, she said. Some fire hides inside those who smile gently and say they love you. Tamba opened his mouth to respond, but the mark on Sina's thigh began to flicker again. Only this time, it wasn't. Red dot, it was violet. Something was coming, not from the past. From him. The flickering violet glow danced on the walls. casting strange shadows on Tamba's face. He didn't flinch, didn't ask questions. He just watched her to calm, to still Sina. Stood. The silk wrap clung to her thighs as the glow pulsed from beneath. And with every step she took toward him, the air thickened. "You said you came for respect," she whispered, "but you brought that mask. You knew it would awaken something in me." Tamba rose slowly to his feet. The silence between them was charged, not with anger, but with knowing. "I didn't come to use you," he said softly. "I came to finish what my mother started." Sina's breath caught. She was one of the marked. He nodded. They banished her when she chose love over legacy. When she gave her secrets to a man. Voice sharpened. "That man was your father?" Tamba looked away. "Yes. And because of that, the spiral lost its song. The marked women vanished. The fire dimmed." Sina stepped closer, chest nearly against his. "So what do you want from me, Tamba? Redemption or revenge?" He didn't blink. Both. Mask lay on the floor now, humming faintly. The mark on her thigh pulsed back, violet melting into gold. Sina's eyes narrowed, voice low and molten. "Then tell me the truth. Did you love me? Or just need me?" Tamba's jaw clenched. "And then I loved you before I knew you. But I needed you the moment I touched that mask." Sina stepped back, because that's the most dangerous thing he could have said. Not hate, not lust. But destiny, wearing the clothes of love, and now she had to choose. Would she become the fire again, or let him burn alone? That night, Sina didn't sleep. The hut whispered. The mask glowed faintly in the corner. The mark on her thigh throbbed. In waves not painful, just hungry. Outside, the moon swam through heavy clouds. Inside, Tamba sat cross-legged, watching the flame burn low. She didn't speak. She simply walked toward him. Every step she took felt fated, not chosen, remembered. Like she'd done this before, 100 lives ago. She sat across from him. Let the silence settle like dust. Then she reached for the mask. "I saw the women," she said quietly. "In my vision." Tamba nodded. "I hoped you would. They were waiting for me. But not as their sister. As their test." The fire cracked. "What will you do?" he asked. Sina didn't answer. Instead, she lifted her fingers to the mask. But this time, she didn't put it on. She broke it. With one swift motion, the obsidian cracked down the center, splitting the face in two. The fire roared. The mark on her thigh exploded in golden light, shooting up her body, circling her arms, her throat, her eyes, until her whole body shimmered like living flame. Tamba didn't move. He just watched. "Why?" he whispered. "Because they weren't testing me," Sina said. Her voice now layered like 100 women spoke through her. "They were testing you." Suddenly, the hut shook. The earth didn't tremble with rage. It pulsed with return. The circle of the marked was reforming. Their power, once stolen, was rising again. Not through secrecy, through choice. Sina turned to Tamba's burning, body glowing. "You don't get to decide what kind of fire I am. I'm not here to warm you. To burn you." She stepped closer. "I'm here to reignite the world." At first, it was just a whisper, a passing rumor. Carried by traitors woven into song by the griots, the woman with fire beneath her skin has returned. In the market, old women clutched their necklaces. In the shrine, the elders poured libations twice that morning. And in the forest paths where lovers used to sneak kisses, the trees stood still, listening. The hut where Sina and Tamba once lived had been abandoned, so they thought. But some swore they saw light glowing from within it at night. A warm, golden pulse. Like a heartbeat, the villagers began noticing strange things. A dried riverbed that suddenly ran again, after a young girl stood barefoot on its banks and sang. A long-dead fig tree blooming in the shape of a spiral. A baby born under a red moon with a faint mark on her calf, a curl of light like a serpent sleeping. "It's the mark," someone whispered. "She's bringing it back." But not everyone rejoiced. In the council hut the old men sat silent. The chief's son, who had once courted Sina and fled, now kept guards near his bed at night, because deep down, they all remembered. She had married 100 men, and only one stayed. What had she done with the rest? Where were they now? One hunter claimed to see them in a dream standing along a cliff, watching a spiral of flame rise from the valley below. Not dead, not alive, changed. It began with the wind, not the kind that cools the brow or carries the scent of rain, but a heavy wind, one that announces someone important is coming. Children stopped their games. Dogs whimpered and crawled under huts. Birds took flight straight up like the sky had shifted its breath. Then they saw her, walking barefoot down the main path. Her skin shimmered like it had swallowed the sunset, not painted, glowing. Her hair braided in a crown of thorns and gold thread. Her hips wrapped in cloth etched with ancient symbols no elder could name. But what silenced everyone was the mark, just above her thigh. Faintly visible beneath sheer fabric glowed the spiral live, pulsing, moving like it was. Breathing, Sina had returned. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't angry. She was. Whole, behind her, walked no man, only the wind, the dust, and the quiet fear of truth long buried. The first to approach her was a girl no older than 10, wide-eyed, barefoot, wearing a dress patched at the seams. She reached out a hand. "Are you the woman from the stories?" Sina looked down, kneeled, placed her glowing hand over the girl's heart. "No," she whispered. "You are. I'm just the story waking you up." Tkas. The women began to come forward, hesitant at first. Then, in waves, mothers, daughters, widows, each drawn to her light, like seeds remembering how to bloom. But the elders, the chiefs, the men in fine robes, watched from the shadows, because they knew she had not come back to be accepted. She had come back, so they could finally answer. They gathered in the central square, not because they were invited, but because something in their blood refused to stay away. The drumbeats had stopped. The chants held their breath. Even the air around the village thickened, waiting. Sina stood at the center. Her feet were dusted with red clay, her shoulders bare. Her spiral mark glowing faintly with every word unspoken, but ready. She looked at the crowd, the women who bore silence like jewelry, the men who wore fear like second skin. Then she spoke. "You feared me, but I was never the monster. You whispered that I bewitched the men who married me, that they vanished into shadows never to return." She took a slow step forward, eyes locked with the elders beneath the baobab tree. But not one of those men was taken. Not one was cursed. They ran, murmurs rippled. Some gasped. Others already knew. Deep down they ran because they looked into me and saw the truth that I could see through them, through their pride, through their hunger for control masked as love. I didn't seduce them. I reflected them. She turned toward the chief's son. "You wanted to conquer what you could not understand, but when the fire did not kneel, you fled." The villagers were silent now, unmoving, because she wasn't just telling her story, she was telling theirs. "This mark," she said, brushing the glow on her thigh, "it doesn't mean seduction, it means awakening. It means carrying the memory of all women who were made to feel too much, too loud, too wild, too knowing. But we are not too much. We are just returned." And with that, Sina knelt, touching the earth the ground warmed beneath. Her palm, and from the soil, a single red flower bloomed, one known only to the old myths. One that only grew where a truth had been buried too long. The spiral was no longer just on her body. It was in the land, as in the hearts, in the air, and it had just begun to turn again, just as the villagers began to murmur. As Sina's words sank like seeds into soil, a shadow approached from the edge of the crowd. He walked barefoot, covered in dust, clothed in a faded garment. No one in the village wore any more. His eyes were strange to calm. To knowing, some gasped, some backed away, because they recognized him. "That's Ekon," a woman whispered. The sixth husband. He'd vanished years ago. No trace. No farewell. Rumors said he'd been swallowed by the forest. By madness. By her. But here he was. And yet, he wasn't. He stepped into the clearing, his gaze fixed on Sina, not with anger, not with fear, but reverence. She didn't harm me, he said, voice quiet but echoing. She showed me. The chief's son stiffened. The elders exchanged looks. Where were you all this time? One of them barked. Ekon turned slowly. In the place between shame and truth. In the spiral, lifted his shirt. Across his chest, glowing faint but alive, was the same mark. A spiral, branded not by fire. But by choice, she didn't destroy me. She freed me. But I had to let go of the man I pretended to be to become the one I feared. He walked toward Sina, then stopped short. I couldn't stay, because I wasn't ready to be seen. But now I am. Sina didn't smile. Didn't cry. She simply placed her palm to his chest. The marks on both of them flared and merged in golden light between them. Not lovers. Not enemies. Witnesses. And in that moment, the village saw this story wasn't about seduction or marriage. Fear. It was about what happens when one woman dares to live in her full truth. One man chooses to stand beside her without needing to control it. The moment their marks touched, a ripple of gold burst outward, not like fire, but like memory waking up. The village didn't tremble. Remembered birds in the trees stopped chirping. The earth hummed, low and deep, like a drum long buried under silence. And then strange things began to happen. Potter's hands began shaping bowls faster than his mind could follow. Every swirl on the clay echoing the spiral. A child with no voice since birth opened her mouth and began to sing, not words, but tones ancient women once used to call down. Rain, an old woman blind for 20 years, wept quietly. The light, she whispered. I can see the light again. Sina did not smile. She was beyond pride now. She simply watched the spiral do what it always had, unravel fear. Reclaim power. Return truth, but not everyone embraced it. In distant huts, men clutched talismans, muttering prayers to silence the old ways. The chief sat trembling, beads of sweat rolling down his temples. If this continues, he muttered, we won't be needed. Because deep down, he knew the spiral didn't just awaken women. It awakened choice. And where there is choice, there is change. Ekon stood beside Sinanot as protector, not as husband, but as equal. And together, they turned to the crowd. Sina raised her arm. The spiral mark flared this time, projecting a pattern into the air, visible to all, a golden path leading beyond the village, into the unknown, into the next story. This mark isn't mine alone, Sina said. It belongs to those who are ready to remember who they were before fear taught them to forget. That night, the moon rose full, brighter than it had in generations. Its silver light poured over the village like water, spilling into every corner where truth had once been hidden. Sina stood at the sacred clearing, her spiral marks still glowing, but now dimmed, not from weakness, but from passing on. Around her, the villagers gathered. Some came with open hearts, some with clenched fists. Most came with questions they had buried for too long. She didn't tell them what to do. She only told them this. The spiral doesn't force. It invites. You can stay in the circle of fear, or walk the path of becoming. Then she stepped aside. A hush fell as the path of golden light reappeared, stretching beyond the village, into forest and shadow, one by one. Some villagers stepped forward, a young mother who had once been beaten for speaking too boldly, a boy who always danced in secret when no one was watching, an elder who had carried guilt for a love, never spoke aloud. They walked toward the spiral's path, and the light welcomed them, not judging, only receiving. Others stayed behind, some out of fear, some out of comfort. Easier to pretend nothing had changed, and that, too, was part of the tale. Sina and Ekon were the last to walk the path, before she vanished into the golden glow. She turned once more and said, I was never the danger. I was the mirror, and what terrified you was seeing yourself clearly. Then the light took them not into death, but into legend. And from that night on, the spiral would appear to those ready to remember, painted on cave walls, hidden in the folds of fabric, swirling in the eye of a storm, because truth cannot be buried forever. It only waits until someone brave enough walks toward it. Years passed, the village changed. Huts became homes, traditions softened. New leaders rose them, wiser, some not, but there was always one night, once a year, when the fire in the center of the village burned hotter than usual, and the people gathered not for a feast, not for a ritual, but for a story. Old women with cracked voices would begin in whispers. Do you remember the woman with the spiral? It's the one who married 100 men and scared them all away. Children leaned closer. Young men smirked until they felt the cold prickle at the back of their necks. The women listened in stillness, hearing between the words, because the tale had grown. Some said she had wings. Some claimed she vanished into a leopard's skin. Others believed she still walked among them, hidden as a traveler, a market woman. A song, but the truth? No one could agree on that anymore, except for this. Whenever someone felt trapped, whenever someone felt afraid to be their full self, they would feel a pulse, a heat, a glow deep in the bones, and they would know. She had been there, and the spiral had begun to turn again. The tale didn't stay behind clay walls and smoky fires. It traveled, with traders crossing borders, with hunters whispering beside dying embers, with weavers threading unseen patterns into their cloth. And everywhere it went, the story shifted. In one region, she was called Naya, the woman of the UC, flame. In another, Zuberi, the one who wore the night. But no matter the name, the tale always began the same. She married 100 men, and only one ever stayed. Some laughed, some gasped. Some grew still, feeling a part of themselves stir a part they'd buried long ago. In a desert camp, a girl with cracked heels and silent eyes heard the story and began to draw spirals. In the sand, in a mountain village, a boy who never fit in traced the mark behind a waterfall. Sensing he wasn't alone, in cities of steel and noise, young women painted the spiral on their skin, hidden beneath their sleeves, close to their thighs, or pulsing on their backs like silent shields. The story moved like smoke, through cracks, around corners, into dreams. It didn't need to be believed. It only needed to be felt, and those who felt it changed. They didn't always know why, only that something in them had awakened. A voice, a fire, a hunger to remember who they were before the world told them to be small. The village had grown quieter over the years. Children played where warriors once trained. The sacred clearing, where the spiral first burned, was now overgrown with golden grass. Many had forgotten, but then one morning, a stranger arrived. A woman tall and wrapped in blue cloth that shimmered like river water at dusk. She bore no weapons, spoke little, but around her neck hung a pendant, a spiral, forged in gold, old, worn, but glowing faintly as if it still remembered. The elders gathered, curious. "Who are you?" they asked. She did not give a name. Instead, she knelt, placed the spiral gently on the ground, and said, "I followed this story through dust and stars. I need to know. Was she real?" The crowd murmured. Some chuckled. Few shook their heads. "She was just a tale," someone muttered. "A lesson for girls with wild hearts." But the oldest among them, a blind man with white hair and a voice like rain, spoke softly. "Real? Child, she's more real than the roof above your head. She lives in every woman who refuses to shrink, and every man brave enough to stay." The stranger smiled, her eyes wet. She had not come for proof, to carry the story forward. That night, she sat by the fire with the children and began, "Let me tell you of the woman with the mark between her thighs." And once again, the spiral turned. The story of the woman with the spiral didn't stay in one place anymore. It lived in songs sung while pounding yam, in riddles whispered by lovers beneath woven mats, in drum beats that thudded like heartbeats. During moonlit ceremonies, some spoke her name, some dared not. But all of them, whether they believed in spirits, shadows, or only in the stories passed from their grandmothers, felt her presence when the night grew still. She was no longer just the woman who married 100 men. She had become something deeper, a warning to those who judged too quickly, a torch for the silenced and strange, a mirror for those afraid of the power they carried inside, and the spiral. It began to appear in the oddest places, carved into the bark of trees no one had touched, painted on the walls of long-abandoned shrines, etched into jewelry worn by women who had never met but shared the same fire in their eyes. Elders called it a blessing, skeptics called it superstition. But storytellers? They smiled, because they knew a tale like hers does not end. It evolves. Every time it's told, it finds a new shape, a new voice, a new heart to set on fire. And in each generation, there is always one, a girl who feels out of place, a boy who feels too soft, a soul that carries questions no one else dares ask. They hear the tale, and suddenly they don't feel alone anymore, because the spiral found them. Centuries passed, villages became towns, towns became cities, wrapped in wires, satellites, and sound. The drum beats faded, the fires dimmed, but the story refused to vanish. One day a young woman scrolling through her glowing screen paused. A video played. Thumbnail showed a woman with half her face in shadow, and a glowing spiral near her thigh. The title read, "What she hid between her legs terrified every man in the village." She clicked. A voice whispered, warm and close, "She married 100 men, and only one stayed." Right. The young woman's heart skipped. She had never visited a village, never danced barefoot beneath the stars, never heard folk tales under mango trees. But this story, it wrapped around her like smoke. She replayed the scene, again and again, not for entertainment, but for something else, a memory she never lived, a truth she had forgotten to look for. The spiral had found her even here, in the land of code and concrete, and she wasn't the only one. Others found it too, in stories, in music, dreams that felt ancient and alive. The spiral no longer belonged to one village. It belonged to anyone brave enough to feel it. And so it is said that when a story becomes more than words, when it shapes lives, stirs hearts, and whispers across generations, it is no longer a tale. It is a living thing. The spiral was never just a mark. It was a map. A path through shame, desire, fear, and fire, winding, looping, never straight but always leading inward. To the truth, the woman, she may be gone, or she may still walk among us, masked, veiled, humming softly beneath her breath as she watches who dares to listen. And every time the story is told, her spiral turns once more, in a village, a city, in a screenlit bedroom at 3 a.m., in the hush between two lovers. In the mind of a child asking questions no one else asks, it turns, not to end, but to begin. Again, the end of this telling, but not the story. But here's the part they never told you. The last husband, the one who stayed. He didn't just uncover her secret. He became part of it, and to this day no one knows what truly happened to him. Some say he vanished. Others claim he walks the earth marked by the same spiral, silent, watching, waiting for the next soul, curious enough to look deeper. So now, I ask you, would you have stayed? Would you have dared to uncover what she was really hiding? Tap subscribe if you want to hear the truth, because the next tale, it's even darker, and it starts with you.